I've been talking a lot about horror comics this month, but what are my top 10 all-time favorite horror comics? Stay tuned and watch this video till the end. And we're back. My name is Taylor. This is Taylor Talks Comics. All month long of October, I've been doing a different horror comic or horror comic related topic every single day. We are now 24 days into the month. 24, right? Yeah, 24 days into the month. So we've had 24 days of this. I figured what better time than now to go over my top 10 list of top 10 all-time favorite horror comics. But I don't want to be the only participant in this. Please comment down below with your top 10, top 5, whatever list you want to put together of horror comics of all time. I like to look at those. Sometimes I get recommendations out of those lists. Sometimes I revisit classics that people have rated higher than I, and that sort of thing. But also give the video a thumbs up, and comment down below with any thoughts. You can tell me my list sucks, whatever you want to tell me. All that engagement of the thumbs ups and the comments help my videos. It helps the YouTube algorithm put my videos and my channel in front of the eyeballs of people that don't know my channel exists. Also, subscribe if you haven't already. I'm on the road to 3,000 subscribers. I'm trying to get there by the end of this year. That's my goal, and I could use your help. And also share my channel. Share it on Reddit. Share it on Twitter. Share it on Instagram. Anywhere you see people talking about horror comics, share this video. I'd love that too. So let's get started. I'm going to do a countdown for my number. I do have these in order. Although, honestly, the top 3 are pretty stuck in their place right now. But all the other ones could probably adjust based on, I don't know, how I'm feeling on a certain day. But regardless, these are all my top 10 favorite. So first is my favorite thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. This is an incredible 2-volume story where Emil Ferris totally obliterates what you think needs to be done with comic books. It's all done on notebook paper with ballpoint pen, and that's some type of art that I absolutely love. Jim Rugg does a great job with that kind of art as well, but Emil Ferris fills in 800 plus pages of an incredible artwork. It's a total love letter to classic monster movies, classic monster film, and whatnot in these 2 tomes put out by Fantagraphics. And it's all about a story about a little girl trying to face the realities of real life, but through her fandom of horror and her fandom of monsters. Really incredible story. Can't recommend it enough. Number 9 is Aliens Dead Orbit by James Stokoe. This is put out by Dark Horse Comics. It has since been reprinted by Marvel Comics. I think it's in volume 4 of their Aliens omnibuses. But Aliens Dead Orbit is... I love Aliens comics in general. Aliens is one of my favorite horror franchises and movies and comics. But this is the best of the best, I believe, as far as Aliens comics go. I think James Stokoe's artwork is so perfect for it. It's so hyper-detailed, and all the little mark making that fills the entire page, I feel like fits right in line with Aliens, which is all about feeling like the claustrophobia of being stuck in space with these monsters. And it's just a really, really great story. It is 4 issues. I guess, put out by Dark Horse. Another Aliens comic honorable mention would be the Alien, the illustrated story. I talked about that earlier this month, which was an adaptation done by Archie Goodwin and Walter Simonson. The artwork in that is absolutely amazing as well. So yes, Aliens Dead Orbit is number 9. Number 8 is Uzumaki. This one is really important for me. This was what got me into reading manga. Manga was a whole type of comics that I wanted to explore, but I was having trouble with the orientation of the page and all those things that we struggle with if we come from comics to try to read manga. But Junji Ito in general, for whatever reason, his page layouts helped me figure that orientation out. But Uzumaki was the first one that really planted that seed for me into really liking horror manga. Horror manga is another type of horror comics that I love, and I've shown off quite a few of those on my channel this month. But Uzumaki is like all about the impending dread. It's got a lot of surreal artwork in it too, which I love surreal horror. And it's all about these people being obsessed with spirals, literally the spiral design, and the page turn. I always talk about how the page turn is one of the most powerful tools we have in comics that no other medium has. where the page turn reveal and what's seen on the other page. And I don't think there's anyone in comics that has utilized that tool better than Junji Ito, and especially in Uzumaki. So those page turn reveals are like jump scares in movies. So that's my number 8. Number 7 is At the Mountains of Madness by Go Tanabe. This is H.P. Lovecraft's story being adapted by the mangaka Go Tanabe. It was put out by Dark. I did a video on this book earlier this month as well. If you want to watch the full-length video, I'll try to link it above. But H.P. Lovecraft, his stories were all known for being like super bleak and just watching characters be sent into a spiral of madness in their own right, which I think Junji Ito was inspired by Lovecraft. But we're talking about Go Tanabe now. But H.P. Lovecraft also had this unexplainable terror and this unexplainable monsters in his stories that he would just put the reader in a position to think about the worst thing imaginable for their stories and let their imagination create that dread for themselves. So it's hard to adapt H.P. Lovecraft for that reason in movies or comics. And I think Go Tanabe knocked it out of the park with this one. All of the indescribable monsters and things that happen towards the end absolutely look beautiful on the page from what Go Tanabe put together for this manga. And I can't recommend it enough. Again, go watch that video if you want to see a closer look. Number 6, Ice Cream Man by Martin Morazzo and W. Maxwell Prince. Again, I have a video on this one earlier this month as well. It's been put out in 2 deluxe editions that are called Sunday editions. Third, hopefully, is on the way. But also it's been released in trade paperback and single issues, all from Image Comics. And it's such a great horror anthology series, which I love horror anthologies. You'll see one later on this list. But Creepy or Eerie Magazine, EC Comics, the horror anthology has been like, that's a rich history in comics. But this is a different take on it. This is where the Ice Cream Man is a central figure and host of these stories, but he's also a character within the story. And each issue holds up as its own unit. Like it could be read one and done, then as a complete package. And I think that's such a brilliant thing to do in today's age, especially when collected editions reign supreme in the comic book world, and single issues are kind of only for collectors and things. And that's not degrading single issues. If you read single issues, that's a different topic for a different day. But like Marvel, DC, like Image, all the mainstream, like build their single issues to be built into trade paperbacks and whatnot. Ice Cream Man can live on its own as single issues, and each story is like a different story, but all kind of melds together into this great universe that they're crafting. I can't recommend enough. The creepiness is great. Martin Morazzo's deadline, clean line art style is amazing. It kind of brings you into a false sense of security with these kind of static characters and images until it gets to the weird and monster stuff. It really like flips you on your head when you're reading it. So that's my number 6. Number 5 is Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron by Dan Clowes. Daniel Clowes is one of my favorite cartoonists, period. Anytime he dabbles in the surreal horror genre, I absolutely love it. He has a very David Lynchian type vibes to his stories when he does that. And Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron is totally in that vibe. If you're like a fan of like Twin Peaks or David Lynch at all in that regard, I can't recommend this story enough. Just so many weird characters that are within this world are supposed to be totally normal, and that's like the creepiness effect. It's like unsettling, and that's my favorite kind of horror anyways, because I feel like that's, to me, like when characters are acting like those things are just absolutely normal or real, it's like it kind of creeps me out. But yes, Daniel Clowes is a master cartoonist, and I can't recommend that one enough. Number 4 is Swamp Thing, in most particular the Alan Moore run with artwork by Stephen Bissette, Rick Veitch, John Totleben. That run is absolutely, I think, a masterclass in what you need to do with horror comics if you're working with the big 2, Marvel or DC. It totally fits in that wheelhouse of DC Comics, but becomes its own thing. And what I think is the birth of what Vertigo Comics became. Swamp Thing under the Alan Moore run was not, the Vertigo imprint did not exist yet. It didn't exist until Nancy Collins starts doing Swamp Thing. But if you're a big fan of Vertigo comics and you go back and read that Swamp Thing run, you'll see that all of the things are being put in place there too, especially with Karen Berger coming on as editor for that run in the latter 2/3 of that run. But just an absolute masterclass of all types of horror that Alan Moore works in. And Stephen Bissette and Rick Veitch and John Totleben, they are masters of that horror artwork. Total perfect sequels to what Bernie Wrightson did first with the Swamp Thing character, which was also a masterclass. Bernie Wrightson is amazing. I'm not trying to say that they did better than, but they built on top of that. So that's my number 4. Number 3, allow me to cheat a little bit here. EC Comics. I'm going to put Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear, Tales from the Crypt all in this one slot. But EC Comics were the pioneers of the horror comic genre. Horror comics existed before that, but they're the absolute pioneers that set a standard for what you can do with horror comics and what makes them great. And everyone afterwards that has tried to make a horror comic has had to follow that tough act. But with those 3 horror anthologies of Tales from the Crypt, Haunt of Fear, Vault of Horror, they had such great artists come through. Johnny Craig, Ghastly Graham Ingalls, Jack Davis, to name a few, that all had different styles to them. You can see one of those cartoonist artwork and pick it out of the lineup right away. And to see all of them within the same umbrella in one issue, it was just magnificent. And these stories were totally horrific, totally some of the most like violent, gory kind of artwork you would see, but the stories were also amazing. And they had these snap endings like you'd get from like Twilight Zone, where there's 6 to 8 page strips, and by that 8th page you get a twist ending where the ultimate bad guy within the story gets their comeuppance. They're just desserts, they would call it. And every time it's delightful to read. I can't get enough of them. I still have not read every EC Comics that exists, and I love that because there's just so many more that I can read and enjoy. Number 2 is Monsters by Barry Windsor-Smith. I showed this off earlier this month as well. Total masterclass of comics. This was his magnum opus. It was his swan song as well. He was retired after releasing this in 2021. This is a story that Barry Windsor-Smith was developing over the course of 30 plus years. It started off as a incredible Hulk single issue story that he pitched to Jim Shooter and had almost finished before Jim Shooter pulled the plug on it and said that they can't release it in the way that Barry Windsor-Smith wrote it. It was then subsequently stolen or unstolen, whether whoever you believe, by Bill Mantlo in a Hulk story. It was supposed to tell the origin of Hulk and how he was, how Bruce Banner grew up with child abuse, as a victim of child abuse, and how that kind of led to his anger issues as the Hulk. But Barry Windsor-Smith worked it, made his own characters with it, and became this 365-page tome that is total masterclass of comics. He does all the lettering, all the inking, all the pencils, and the panel layouts are amazing. The lettering is amazing. I want an Eisner just for the lettering. If you want a good example of good comic book lettering, you just look no further than that comic itself. And the characters are all very deep, and it's one of those comics that warrants rereading, because as the story unfolds, you'll see some characters later in the story that you recognize from earlier in the story, and it makes you want to almost reread it just to connect those dots, because it is all very smooth how the whole story is laid out. So Monsters by Barry Windsor-Smith's number 2. Now number 1, Black Hole by Charles Burns. I read this comic book a few years ago, and in my opinion, no other horror comic has topped this. It's just absolutely blew me away. Charles Burns' artwork is brilliant. His brushwork on his inking is just to die for. Like it's so smooth and so perfect. And I can't wait. He's got 2 other comics that he's released just in the last month that I've not read yet, and I can't wait to read those. I'm a big Charles Burns fan. But Black Hole is a story of these teenagers growing up, and in their world, it's like this surreal horror type, like body horror. It's a story. So in their world, to get an STD means you get like some sort of body deformity that you can see on the outside. So imagine like the skepticism and like the stigma that surrounds STDs in the real world. Now imagine if that was on the surface and people can notice those things. Like you get a body deformity because of it and people know that you have this disease. And so you're going through all of these teenagers and having to deal with that, and some teenagers accepting it, their partners that have these deformities, and some teenagers secretly having relations with other kids, or not like little kids, but like I think they're college age maybe, I don't know, I can't remember, but having relations with other peers that without telling them that they have these things, because their deformity is a little bit easier to be hidden. Brilliant story, all mapped out. It's in a graphic novel by Pantheon Books. It was originally released as 10 to 12 issues, I think, in single issues. Really great stuff, especially if you're into surreal horror like David Lynchian or Cronenberg, those kinds of things. Can't recommend that enough. So that's it. That's my top 10 list of horror comics, top 10 favorites of all time. I want to hear your thoughts, though. I want to hear your top favorite horror comics. Please put them in the comments down below. Don't stress about putting them in order or whatever. Just throw some at me. If you want to put them in order too, that'd be great. I always look at those lists for recommendations and those kinds of things. And put comments down below with what your thoughts on my list too. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like I said, I'm on the road to 3,000 subscribers. If you hear anybody on any platform, Facebook, Twitter, or Reddit, or whatever, talking about horror comics, feel free to share this video. I'd appreciate that very much. Thank you guys. Keep talking comics.